So the playoffs are starting. Yay. Um, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I've been a little sick recently, so if my voice sounds like it, that's why. That's why I've been uploading for a while. But yeah, we're gonna talk about my playoff predictions, who I think is gonna win each series, and yeah, I guess we just get started with it. First off, I'll mention the play-in pretty quick. I think it should go pretty chalk. I don't have my major upset, I guess, in the first day. The first day is the 8 and 9 games, I think. Um, I have the Nets winning. That's not an upset. You know, they're favored by like 9 against Cleveland right now, and I think they should win comfortably. I think with Kevin Durant, I think the number is like they're like a 50-win team with him, like a 20-win team without him. They have him, and so they're way better than a 7 seed. I think they'll win that one. The big-ish upset, not really, Minnesota versus the Clippers. I'll actually take the Clippers in that one, simply because I really like Paul George. I like the roster that they have around him as well. When he was healthy, again, they were closer to like a 50-win team, and you know now they're a 42-win team, I think. But I think they're really good, and I think Minnesota is pretty average in terms of like a 7 seed. You know, I think the Clippers have a lot more potential, is what I'm saying. And in a one game, I would take them. And then as for the rest of them, I'll take Minnesota to beat whoever comes out of that game. I would guess the Pelicans, but you know, don't hold me to that. And my upset would be, I think the Hawks are gonna make a run in the East. I think they'll win both their play-in games. The Hornets, not too much of an upset there. The big one is Cleveland, and I think when it comes down to it, the Hawks have Trae Young, and Cleveland doesn't, right? I mean, who's gonna follow that guy around? I mean, Darius Garland is a great offensive player, but he's not great defensively. So I don't see why Trae Young wouldn't drop like 50 and 10 on him. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So I'll take Atlanta to actually win that one, and they'll end up getting the 8 seed in the East. So from there, I guess we can start with the first round. Start off in the West, I guess. We'll talk about Phoenix versus the Timberwolves because there's not much to talk about. I'm just going to take the Suns. They're way better than Minnesota. You know, I don't hate Minnesota. I think they're a decent team. They definitely deserve to be in the playoffs, but they're not the Suns, right? The Suns are the 1 seed. They won like 64 games for a reason, right? They're really good. Their big three is better than Minnesota's across the board. So maybe Cat's better than Ayton, but I don't think it would be significant enough to say that they would beat them in 7. You know, I expect them, maybe they take a game, but it should be Suns in 4 or 5. Right down from there is actually Dallas against Utah, and I think this is like one of the more easier series to predict. I think that Dallas should take it relatively comfortably. The Jazz, I mean, obviously since the break, they haven't been what they were. They were like the 2 seed, or they were the 3 seed, and now they're the 5 seed. And I mean, Dallas has been really good since the break. I think they have the second best record since the break behind Boston, and so that on its own makes you think that Dallas will win. But also Utah's kind of been pummeling like mentally recently. You know, they have a lot of guys talking about where are they going to go, are they going to get traded or something like that. And you know, I really like Luka. Since the break, he's been one of, if not the best player in the league, so I'll take them there. Golden State versus Denver, I think will actually be a really good series. I kind of wish we could have seen Dallas versus Denver. I think that would be a really nice series, but you know, Golden State versus Denver should be good. The thing is that the Nuggets aren't going to get healthy. You know, we thought they might have. We thought they might have had Jamal Murray or MPJ back. By this point, they're not back. And so I think this version of the Nuggets, I don't think they're good enough to beat Golden State. Now, I don't know what Steph's health is going to look like. You know, they might not get him back before the series starts, and even if they do, he might not be 100% for the first couple games. So I could legitimately see this going to 6 or 7 games, but I will take Golden State here. I think that, especially if Steph's playing, just that big three with him, Clay, and Dre, we haven't seen them very much this year at all. Actually, we haven't seen them at all this year, but I think that big three, Steph and Draymond together, are a really nice duo. And then you add in Klay Thompson. Jordan Poole has been playing great. Kuminga's kind of came on. Looney looks good. So I'll take Golden State there over Denver. And then here's one of the bigger upsets I would predict. And this entirely depends on whether or not the Clippers will get fully healthy. They play Memphis. And, you know, I think Memphis is a pretty good team. But as far as 2 seeds go, I'm not entirely convinced on them, right? I think like they're really good without Ja Morant, which makes you think they could beat anybody in the playoffs because they have a lot of depth and whatnot. But you know, with him, they're still a 2 seed. But I just don't know how much they scare me, right? If I'm a team that's going up against them. Whereas the Clippers, without Kawhi Leonard, I think they're pretty easy to beat as well. But if he's healthy, even if he's like 80%, if you get him back for most of the games, I would take the Clippers in that series. I think that they have a better roster. Again, Kawhi is significantly better than whoever Memphis' best player. So is Paul George. I would take Paul George over John Morant for a series. That might be a hot take, but whatever. And so, yeah, I think that the Clippers, if they're healthy, could beat Memphis. Now, if they're not, if Kawhi doesn't come back and it's just Paul George in that team, I would probably take Memphis. And we don't know what we're going to see from Kawhi, so you might say I'll just take Memphis, but for the sake of this bracket, I'm going to assume that they get Kawhi in some form at some point in the series, just based on the fact that Kawhi's never really cared that much about the regular season to begin with. So I think that he's been saving his health for the postseason. So I'll give the series to the Clippers. I'll actually pick them over Memphis in what's kind of an unfortunate draw for Memphis. I think that if you're them, you don't expect to have to face a team that made the Western Conference Finals last year in the first round if you get the 2 seed, but that's just how the cookie crumbled. To go over to the East, the Heat versus Atlanta, it would be the first series, and I think that will be a pretty interesting series, mostly because, Trae Young, he's a really interesting player. Any game that he's in, any series that he plays in will be interesting, and what they did last year inspires confidence, but I think the Heat should take it. Roster-wise, they're pretty much better from top to bottom, and I think if Jimmy Butler elevates in the playoffs, which we've seen him do in the past, then I expect them to be able to win this one semi-comfortably. I'd say maybe 6 games, 5 or 6 games is what I would expect this series to go. I'll take the Heat there. Sixers and Raptors is really interesting because very recently we actually found out that one of the Sixers starters, Matisse Thybulle, won't be able to play in Toronto. Now that might change, I don't know, but as of right now it's looking like he won't be able to play the games in Toronto because he's not vaccinated, and they have their vaccine mandate there, which is something they were talking about with Kyrie Irving would be scary, but now the Sixers are going to have to deal with it. That makes it a lot more interesting because I think Philly on paper is a better team. Like, obviously they're 1, Joel is way better than any player on the Raptors, and I would say they're 2, Harden is probably better than most of the players on the Raptors too. I mean, Scotty Barnes has been good recently. Fred VanVleet's pretty good. The Raptors are a good team. Siakam's obviously been playing really well, but the Sixers look way better on paper, but you got to think defensively too, and you got to think as a team. I would take Nick Nurse over Doc Rivers 100 times out of 100 as a coach. So this one's actually kind of star power of the Sixers versus, the well-rounded team aspect of the Raptors. And I'm actually going to go with the Sixers, despite, the fact that I've probably kind of been hammering on them a little bit. But I just think that, Harden, I think he has one good playoff series in him. I think Embiid's going to be a really nice playoff player. He's had a really good year. I think he'll show that in the playoffs. And so I'll take them over the Raptors. Though I do like the Raptors, I think this could easily go to 6 or 7 games, especially if Thybulle, if he ends up being a major loss for the Sixers, if they don't know how to play without him, inserting Danny Green in that lineup. Who knows what's going to happen, but I'll take the Sixers to win it in 6 or 7. Bucks Bulls will not be as close. I'm just going to say it. Chicago is nowhere near the Bucks level. It should be the Bucks in 4 or 5 games, if I'm being honest. The question is who's going to stop Giannis. It's not Vooch. DeRozan's too small, and so is Caruso, or Ball's out, I think. But they just don't have an answer for Giannis. I think he could easily average 40 a game in this series. And even the guards of the Bulls, they're good, but I mean, Caruso and DeRozan have had amazing years, but I don't think it's that much of a difference between the Bucks with Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. I think those would be decent matchups. And then again, Giannis. The Bucks have them, the Bulls don't, so I'll take the Bucks there. And then finally, the really interesting series in the East, I think, is Nets-Celtics. It's kind of a 2 powerhouse teams going up against each other. A lot of people think the Nets are 7 seed, and they're not that, but you have the best player in the world, or one of the 2 best players in the world, with Kevin Durant. It's him or Giannis there. Versus the Celtics, who have been the best team in the league since the break. And defensively, it's also a clash between the best defensive team and the best offensive team. And so, many people would say defenses win championships, but that hasn't really proven to be true in the NBA. A lot of times the best offensive players are the ones that do really well. But it'll be a really interesting series, and it's worth noting that the Celtics probably won't have Robert Williams for the series. A lot of people are saying he might be a round 2, he'll return there. So if it goes to 6 or 7 games, which I think it will, then they would have him back, and that will help them out a lot, as he's their defensive anchor. So he'll be good for stopping guys like Kyrie when he tries to penetrate, or Kevin Durant when he does the same. This is a 50-50 call for me, and I'm probably biased, but I'm going to take the Nets. I've watched a lot more of the Nets this year, is why I say that, but I just really like their star power. I think that Durant is better than Tatum. I think that Kyrie's better than Jaylen Brown. And, you go down the board, the Celtics will probably have a couple advantages after that, but I think Steph Curry's a good fit if he's healthy, which he probably will be by the time this series would start. And then, Drummond's been decent for him. Maybe Aldridge gets minutes. I don't know exactly what either of these teams are going to do at center, really. That's a big question, but I'm actually going to take the Nets in what will be an upset pick, because the Celtics should be favored here, but I don't think it should be as much as they would be. And so I'll take the Nets to win it in 6 or 7 once again. So going back over to the West, Phoenix would play Dallas next, and I think this would be a close series, maybe 6 games, maybe 7 if Luka shows up and the Suns play down, but I think the Suns should take this one comfortably. They're just a significantly better team across the board. Dallas has, again, been playing really well since the break, but so have the Suns, and the difference is the Suns have been doing it all year, right? It's not just since the break, so I think they're, again, the better team across the board. I think the Suns they're favorites for a reason, right? They're a really great team. As for the Warriors versus the Clippers, this one's interesting, and I think it really would come down to who can play better at their peak, right? Like, if Steph's healthy, if Kawhi's healthy, Paul George healthy, if everyone's healthy, who's the better team? And it's really close for me because I really like the duo of Paul George and Kevin Durant, or of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, sorry. But I also really like the Warriors' big three. And so when it comes down to it, I think I'm going to take the Warriors here, just because I don't know. I mean, kind of like when we saw Paul George and Kawhi Leonard play together last year, it was really after Kawhi got hurt that Paul George really came out and started playing like an amazing player that we know he is, but, he didn't really do it when he was overshadowed by Kawhi. And I think that, again, who's stopping Steph? Obviously, that's the question you got to ask with the Warriors. And I just really like what the Warriors do as a team. I think they're one of the teams to beat, so I'm going to take them over the Clippers. Going back over to the East, the Heat versus the Sixers. I think the Heat should win this one semi-comfortably. Maybe I'm too high on the Heat. Maybe I think the Sixers can take them, but I just don't think that. I think the Heat should win it, right? I think the Sixers are too flawed coaching-wise. Their players haven't really proven it in the playoffs. We don't know how good of a fit Harden and Embiid are going to be. They've shown at times they can be really good, but they've also shown at times they can be really not good. So I'm just going to take the Heat. I think they're way more consistent. I think you get Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. You also got the Heat. They got like 7 or 8 really good players, right? Like Robinson, Hero, Victor Oladipo, Bam, PJ Tucker. They have a lot of good players, whereas the Sixers, I'm not so sure they do. So I'm going to take the Heat over the Sixers in that series. And then Bucks Nets. I would be really happy if we got to see this series. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I mean, last year it went to 7 games, and we saw some amazing games, not only from Kevin Durant and from Giannis, but also just, really thrilling games, right? Obviously, that Game 7 was insane, but just like last year, I would take the Bucks to win this one. I think they're, again, obviously with the Nets, who's stopping Giannis, right? I mean, Durant has done decent against him, but, he can get tired at times because he has to carry the load offensively, and so you can't really guard Giannis for 48 minutes and carry the load offensively. That's not easy to do. And again, defensively, I just don't think the Nets, for any of them, they don't have an answer for Middleton, Bruce Brown. Maybe he can handle it, but they don't have an answer for Drew either. Kyrie Irving kind of got cooked by him the last time they played each other in the regular season. And, the only thing I would say for the Nets is that the Nets almost beat the Bucks last year without Kyrie Irving, and with Kyrie Irving, just based on the way that series was going to go, they probably would have done it if he never got hurt. But that's really the only thing I have to say for the Nets, and they've proven to be really inconsistent this year, whereas the Bucks, I think, are not that. I think they should be able to handle this series. Maybe 6 or 7 games. I would guess probably 6, but yeah, I think that would be a really good series, though. But I would take the Bucks. So moving back over to the West, we'd have the Suns playing the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, which is kind of what we were all predicting at the beginning of the year. And then the Warriors kind of fell off, and the Suns stayed on their hot streak. So you would think that the Suns would be pretty highly favored if this were to end up happening, but I would actually take the Warriors in what I think would be an upset. But, just going down the line, when they played each other this year, it was really close. Obviously, the last game they played, the Warriors didn't have Steph, and they still almost pulled it off, but the Suns ended up closing them out late. But as for this game, I think the Warriors just have too much star power. Honestly, that's it. I think that Steph's better than Booker. I think that Draymond Green is honestly close to on par with Chris Paul. That's a hot take, but I really like Draymond as a player when he's healthy, and especially in the playoffs. He's proven that he can elevate his game in the playoffs, which I think is really valuable to them. And so, whatever you get from Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, Looney, Andrew Wiggins, I think they have what it takes coaching-wise, roster-wise. These teams are extremely close, and I would expect this to go to 6 or 7 games, but I would actually take the Warriors. They have more experience here, and, Chris Paul hasn't proven that he can get it done. Steph has, and so, yeah, I'll just take the Warriors. Again, that would be a hot take, but whatever. Heat Bucks, I don't think it would be as much of a hot take when I say I would take the Bucks. Again, I think they're better at the top. They're just as deep as the Heat. The Bucks got a lot of really good players, and the Heat do too, but I think the Heat don't have Giannis and the Bucks do. Jimmy Butler might put up a fight. We've seen this Heat team beat the Bucks in 2020, but I think that the Bucks should be able to handle this one. They're a lot more experienced. Giannis is the ultimate weapon at this point. He's the best player in the league, and so I would take them to beat out the Heat in what would be, I would guess, 5 or 6, maybe 7, but I don't think it'll go that deep. So I think the Bucks are significantly better, and I think they should be able to get the job done there. And then that would set up a Warriors-Bucks finals, which I think would be a really interesting one, You got a team like the Warriors who they are really deep. They got a lot of really good players, a lot of shooters. I think starting 5-wise, all their starting 5 are really good players, really good shooters, other than Looney. And then you have the Bucks, who they got their big 3, right? They got Giannis, Middleton, and Drew, versus the Warriors, who they got their big 3 as well, with Wiggins and Poole in there as well. I don't really know who would win this series, honestly. I'm gonna pick the Warriors, just because I think that the way they play basketball has proven to be more consistent. Obviously, you go back a long time ago when they won their first title in 2015. It's actually been 7 years now, which is kind of crazy. But, from them to now, whenever they've been healthy, they've been title contenders. And obviously a couple years in there, they had Durant, which made them pretty much unstoppable. But I think this team should be able to get the job done, whereas the Bucks, they won it last year. They looked really good last year, and they look pretty good this year too. But you also got to consider that a lot of players got hurt last year when they won it, and you also got to consider that it's really hard to be a repeat champion, especially if you don't get significantly better in the offseason, which I don't think the Bucks have. And I don't think they're unstoppable like, the last repeat champion that we had was in the Kevin Durant Warriors. I think this would be a really good series, kind of conflicting between, like, three-point shooting of the Warriors. That's what they live and die by, versus the Bucks, who they obviously have a lot of really good shooters, but their best player, Giannis, is not really a three-point shooter. He's not a three-point specialist. Another thing to keep in mind is that I think the Warriors would have an option for Giannis, and that would be Draymond Green, who's the best defensive player in the league, in my opinion. And when he's healthy, he won't win Defensive Player of the Year if he's not been healthy. But I think if you match them up, I think that would be a really good matchup there. And he might be a guy that could hold him to, like, maybe 25 and 12 as opposed to 35 and 16 or whatever the other teams. He might drop 40 a game on him, and I think that could be a limiting factor as to why the Warriors could win it. People realize this, obviously, if you look at the stats, but the Warriors are really good defensively. Even when they play Steph, who a lot of people think is a below-average defender, and maybe he is, but they're a really good defensive team, and I think that will give trouble to the Bucks, who are also a really good defensive team. But I just think it's going to be a really good series, but I would expect it to go to 6 or 7 games, but I would end up taking the Warriors. So, yeah, Warriors is 2022 champs. We can talk about what that would do for Steph's legacy, most importantly. If he were to win Finals MVP, he would have one of those on his resume. It'd be really interesting. That's all I'm going to say. So, yeah, thanks for watching.